Welcome to Bridging Worlds. This is episode 5. In this episode, I talked to Samora Yeboah. Samora was born in Ghana, grew up in Norfolk, and now lives in Bristol. He is a hip-hop artist who is part of a collective called The High Breed, and he released his first book, a collection of mystical poems last year entitled Tales from the Serpent's Mouth. Samora also started a men's circle last year with the aim to bring awareness of the importance of creating support networks to advocate men's mental health and challenge outdated beliefs around masculinity. Through his art, music and writing, Samora hopes to inspire transformation through the power of self-awareness. I adored sharing space with Samora, and this conversation was so interesting and there was so much juice in what he was sharing, so I really hope you enjoy. Okay, so I'm here with Samora today. I'm so excited about this conversation. So I literally came across you, Samora. I don't even know how. I think your name had been mentioned, and Kyle's name had been mentioned as well, who I know you share. You collaborate with.
Yeah.
And so somehow I came across you on Instagram and started following your posts. And when the idea for this Bridging Worlds podcast came through, I was like, I've got to talk to him. So I literally spammed you on all the social media channels, very kind of, hopefully slightly gracefully.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, so excited to talk to you. And I'm trying to kind of explain why. I think firstly, there's this connection with you being mixed heritage. I mean, there is always for me something really exciting in that, and a sense of like belonging and a sense of curiosity, because often the spaces that we can sit in can be not that diverse. That's been my experience anyway.
That's right, yeah.
And also this connection between lyrics and music and poetry and personal development, expansion, space holding, and your sound healing. So just all the things that I love kind of being really presented in the world in a way that is just so inspiring. So yeah, I just want to thank you for what you're bringing, because it really, it feels like it's bringing so much in the online space. It feels really exciting.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your perseverance. And
yeah, we got there.
It took me a while, but here I am. So
always perfect timing. Always perfect timing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like there's loads we could talk about today. I guess this podcast really is. The intention is, spotlighting what it is to be a man in the world today. Gathering the insight from all these men that I'm speaking to around what that means, really, not just in relation to the individual soul journey, but in relation to brotherhood, sisterhood, relationship, fatherhood, perhaps as well. So I wonder if maybe we start there. We start kind of your journey a little bit. Like, I know you're in the men's work field, and you're holding space in that way. Like, what was your beginning? What called you to not just partake, but also to lead in those spaces?
I feel like it was this awareness that in me that there was this lack of community, lack of connection, lack of virtuous role models that showed a way of being, because my upbringing, I feel, being mixed race, in living in Norfolk, growing up in Norfolk, which is very, it wasn't very culturally diverse. So I feel like that beginning, there was a lot of difficulty in terms of like finding my place, finding who I am, a sense of identity and purpose, because it was quite a there wasn't very cultural, but also in terms of like opportunity, there wasn't very much. And I've always been a very creative, passionate, and thoughtful person, and I felt like there wasn't much to nurture that. So there was a lot of difficulty in really becoming a man, in really understanding what it means to be a man, and also to have my creativity recognized, because it wasn't creativity, arts, even music wasn't really something that was promoted in the area that I grew up. So there was a struggle, but as you're probably aware, through that struggle, you find a sense of resilience and sense of internal power. And then eventually you find, I guess, your tribe, people that you can connect with, and a sense of clarity of purpose. And yeah, that's been like quite a long journey, and a lot of bumps and a lot of turns and twists on the way. But now I feel like I'm in a place where I want to offer my awareness and the sort of trials and pitfalls that I went through to other men that are coming through that process of initiation into manhood. That's kind of like the men's work that I do, but also creatively, and also just as an individual who thinks differently, who's really feels that our society doesn't really offer avenues into health, into well-being, into mindfulness. So I want to do everything that I can, everything in my power, to first be a beacon of hope and health within myself, and then from that offer spaces where other people can realize their own power, and we can see the collective power together, as I feel that each of us holds a piece of the puzzle. And once we start to become more open and honest with our pieces, we can see the bigger picture.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to hear about, because I hear, you know, you and a lot of the men I'm speaking to, and this like this drive, this kind of, it feels like this kind of innate drive and this innate desire to seek and to learn and to expand and become like better versions of yourself, or whatever you want to describe it as. But not everyone finds it that easy to follow that path. Like, what are some of the pitfalls that you experienced along the way of, because it's hard breaking out, isn't it, of even if you are connected to people that start to feel like your people, there's an element of having to step forward and be courageous. And I'd love to maybe hear, if you feel to share, if it feels okay to, some of the things on your journey that were challenging in opening into these parts of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's one of them is lack of recognition of a way. You know, in tribal communities, there would have been an initiation process into masculinity, and I had a loving father. I have a loving father, but there wasn't any real emotional connection, and there wasn't really a kind of a collective of brothers or men that, I guess, exemplified virtuous qualities. So I felt like culturally, as many young people do, they get into sort of bad habits like smoking weed or drugs or things that that don't really serve you, because there is this kind of desire to break away from this conditioning. You feel, coming from a child, in that sort of innocent state, you feel alive and connected to spirit or to nature, and then you come through into this kind of cultural realm where typically people go out and drink alcohol, and they use certain substances to, I guess, sometimes to escape, to sometimes numb painful experiences, traumas. And so, you know, you get raised in this culture that's very commonplace, and then you lose your way. You lose your connection to yourself, and then that becomes the norm. And there is, you know, sometimes depression, and then anxiety, and just a feeling of like loneliness, or just at odds with the world and with yourself. So I think, you know, everyone can relate to that, and especially men who haven't really had much guidance, and other men to really show the way. So yeah, I think it's kind of learning of bad habits, really, and not really understanding self and having knowledge of yourself. I mean, in our education system, I feel that it fails a lot of us in terms of like, you know, heritage. And I didn't really learn much about Black culture or indigenous cultures around the world. It was mainly like sort of Roman culture and English history. So you kind of grow up with this kind of specific narrative, and you don't understand the power maybe of your ancestry and your connection to your culture. So yeah, there is a sense of isolation, and you know, you feeling different, but you don't really have much context for that, and you don't really have many people that can show you, yeah, a sense of history, a sense of knowledge that is inherent within each and every one of us. And then on top of that, you have a lot of suppression in terms of like what we consume on a daily basis. It's I feel that there is a lot of toxicity within our society, and if your parents are not aware of that toxicity, they're just trying to do their best to raise you. But when every area of society is, I guess, kind of quite toxic in a way, then you kind of sense you tend to lose sight of who you are. So I think it's just that kind of those layers of becoming a man, going from boyhood to manhood, being in a society that doesn't really offer you much in the way of self-knowledge and personal growth. There is a lot of emphasis on achieving in a very in terms of like what you learn at school, like specific subjects that may differ from your own innate qualities and gifts. And yeah, that's kind of like a recipe for, I guess, confusion and being at odds with your natural state of awareness and innate knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I so relate through, you know, family members really to what you're saying. And yeah, I'm curious, and I guess maybe people listening might be curious, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of women listening to this podcast. So really, we have such a deep desire to know you better, you know, as man, woman. I know we're talking very heteronormatively, but what are some of the things that you guys talk about in your circles? Like, what comes up for you? Because, you know, we have our sister circles, and, you know, we've got our sacred rage, and we've got our, you know, we're learning to trust the masculine, trust ourselves, learn our boundaries, find our getting out of, I guess, our over masculinized ways of being, and all the other elements of what it is to be a woman. So yeah, I guess what are some of the cool themes? I know you mentioned about addiction. We kind of had a quick chat before we jumped on the recording, and that's the topic that really interests me. It's something that I've seen in my ancestry, over and over in various forms. It's something I relate to personally, particularly in my 20s when life just felt so overwhelming and intense. And for some people, they're still in that. For some men, they're still in that. Like, what are some of the things that really are really there as themes for you as men?
Yeah, there's many. I think one of the big themes is that there is this, I guess, idea of men's work that it's predominantly about connecting with the feminine because of the patriarchal idea of masculinity. But what we kind of clarify in the circles is that patriarchal idea of masculinity is not true, authentic masculinity.
Mm.
And men really, not only do they need to understand, I guess, the feminine within their own nature, but they need to really become stronger in their masculine, in what it means to be a man, in holding space, in compassionate awareness, in channeling things like taboo, I guess, emotions like anger and shame and guilt, and utilizing those energies and those qualities in a creative way. So, for example, last year I held a retreat. It was in Dartmoor. So we're in the wilds. It was a 2-day camping retreat. And we had like things like wrestling. And that was really such a primal expression of our masculinity. It was done in such a held and loving way, but it was a great way to channel that aggression and that anger that maybe we feel sometimes at odds with our society. So we get kind of we feel shameful about actually expressing these emotions. So I think these emotions are really important to honor and to express in a way that is seen and heard and shared and just understood. So yeah, I think anger, guilt, and shame are really big subjects for men. And you know, the subject of sexuality, sacred sexuality as well, because a lot of men get raised up on like pornography, for example, and that is such a degrading and kind of toxic way of getting introduced to your own sexuality. And one point that I made yesterday was that men don't celebrate their sexuality. It's not celebrated. The you know, the drive and the energy when you start to get those feelings from a teenage years are not really understood as a very powerful and dynamic energies. And I remember, you know, I never had a conversation with my father about it, or any of the men. It was a talk within my friendship circles, and it was quite sort of derogative. It was quite it was about who was losing their virginity first, and it was this kind of competition. It wasn't this kind of healthy understanding of this sacred energy. And then when you get raised sexually, when you have your ideas about sex through pornography, then that gets turned into shame and guilt, and then that gets put into the shadow. And then from those shadows, you create this unhealthy projection onto women. You can create this sense of, like, you know, desiring women just for that, and not for intimacy and connection. And I think that those things mask intimacy, and that's what we truly want. We truly want deep connection and intimacy. And so these ideas and these kind of shadow elements within the masculine are really important to come into the light, so we can really get down to the root of what it is we really want, and what it is we truly desire, and how we can direct those energies in a way that we can start to understand our own power as men, and we can actually begin to hold space for women. And I do sound therapy, and I mentioned in my circle yesterday that I had such a profound shift with, like I said, becoming, I guess, raised or in the awareness of relating sex to that kind of graphic idea of it, into more of a direct direction, not just in terms of relationship, but like using that energy for creativity and raising it up into action. And I was using this example as well of how I've transformed it, that I had a very powerful sound journey for a client on Saturday night. And she came in the space. She's a healer. She's a masseuse, and she does kinesiology. And we had a sound session. And after the session, she actually had some tears. And she was like, I've never actually been held in a space. And it was so alien to her that a man didn't have any sexual intention. There's no agenda there. It was just from love and through genuine connection and genuine desire to heal, that I wanted to hold a space for her to journey within herself. And that's something that was so alien to her. And that really shocked me and really made me a bit upset in a way, because I was like, wow, like there's so many women and men that haven't been held in a space and seen, and just with loving awareness and kindness and gentleness, but also power, because I feel that when a man fully owns his own power and comes into himself, the power doesn't need to be directed externally. You don't need to dominate others. The power is inherent within your own being, and it's actually a palpable feeling within yourself, and that gets radiated out. And so women can naturally feel like they can express their emotion, they can express who they are, they can move and flow with their natural feminine energy in a way that they can feel seen, and they can feel that like they're not judged. So that for me, that is a really big transformation.
Massive, huge. Oh, I'm getting like goosebumps hearing you speak about that, and it's reminding me of like elements of my own journey. Some of the biggest shifts I've had, or the biggest, is that what I want to say? A huge game changer for me has been being held in space by men. And I did a lot of that last year and the year before, working with male practitioners. And firstly, it was a thing to kind of feel like I was ready to do that, to feel kind of safe enough and able to bring, some real depths of my own vulnerability. But yeah, I would urge any woman listening who's kind of really exploring these themes and who wants to go deeper into their work to work with a man instead of a female practitioner, just even just once.
Exactly.
Because it's really powerful.
As men and women, we need to come into that state of vulnerability with each other. Because I feel that there is a lot of dialogue around men are toxic, men are this and men are that. And actually, through looking at my family, there is also, the shadow feminine, and there is the mother wound as well, that's become very apparent and very clear. And sometimes that actually gets very destructive for men. Because men don't feel like that. Sometimes they feel emasculated, and they don't feel like they're allowed to be in their power, because all men are like this and all men are like this. And so that creates this unhealthy dynamic of men feeling suppressed and not actually acknowledged for their own gifts and qualities. So that's another reason I think we should really open up these dialogues and start this communication, because I think men's circles and women's circles uh, are very powerful as individual collective ideas and sharings. But then I think eventually we need to start to bridge those worlds and come
Yes.
together and share our findings. And in that, I feel that there will be this balance created, because I think inherently women have amazing, beautiful qualities that men can learn from, and equally women can learn from men. So
Exactly. Oh, and I love that you use the words bridging worlds in there, because that, I think that is my, like, beyond these conversations, there is a deep desire for that to happen, for us to start coming together. And who knows, I think it will happen in like little trickly, subtle ways. It's probably already happening in other ways. And that's kind
definitely
of like
happening.
a bigger intention I'm holding for this whole Bridging Worlds community. I mean, who knows? Maybe just the conversations are enough right now.
Yeah, it starts with conversations. It starts with
Yeah,
communication,
yeah,
and then it moves into action, into actual spaces. And I've
yeah.
actually started to hold retreats um, every other month, like medicine retreats. And in those retreats, there are mixed men and women.
Mm.
And again, there is a deep healing of both sides. For example, the first retreat I held, um, this woman was going through a process. We went out for a walk. She started to say, "Oh, can I say something honest to you?" And I said, "Yeah, you can just express yourself." And she said to me, "Oh, is your father chauvinistic?" And I just thought, "Oh, where's this coming from?" I said, "No, he's not. He's not like that at all." And I said, "What's your relationship with your father?" And then she said, "Oh, it's never been great. I feel like he's quite toxic in a lot of ways." And I said, "Well, this is a projection onto me," but I didn't judge her for that. I
Mm.
just held the space for her, and I just mirrored back to her things that she was projecting. And then through that process, she had a profound shift, and she said, "Wow, you are actually a conscious, loving man, and you're helping me to heal my wound around my projection onto men because of
Mm.
my father, my relationship with my father." So
Mhm.
these things are really happening, and
Yeah. Oh,
it's just so exciting and just beautiful to witness this kind of like unfolding of these traumas and these kind of like blocks that we have within ourselves.
definitely. And this is where the receiving these different reflections are so powerful, because, yeah, I have female clients who, and I have stuff within myself still that are these distortions of what men are, and how not even what men are, but how relationships are, who, yeah, like the dynamics that play out. There's like the distortions that exist that are, yeah, so based around the imprints we've held. So
Yeah,
receiving these reflections from men who can hold that space, and who are actually just able to sit in the vulnerability of it all, and hold it somehow, and not get lost in the distortions themselves, is so powerful.
yeah. And the
Oh,
thing is that, I understand why a lot of women feel,
yeah,
because they have experienced
yeah.
neglect, abuse, and the abuse of power from men. So with any kind of prejudice, there's a story that is very real to
Mhm.
each individual.
Yeah.
But it's important that that's why it's so important that we kind of create these spaces, and we teach other men to really hold space for women, and to do that inner work on themselves, so
Mm.
we can start to break down those traumas, and we can actually start to repair everything that has been corrupted and lost in this kind of in this society that we live in. So yeah, I think it's really important, and we're really paving a new way. Every conversation that we have, even now, this conversation is really important,
Yeah.
because it's paving the way for something new to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And also, not just new, it's actually quite ancient as well. It's like both.
Yeah.
It's a remembering of who we are as well. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's really is time to remember. It's so time to remember. And I'm feeling like a thread in there, and maybe this is a desire that I'm bringing from myself, but I think we often can kind of feel like unless we're in relationship, like intimate partnership, that we can't. And actually, I've been guilty of saying this sometimes. Like there are certain things that we're only maybe going to be able to journey as deeply, like in a deep way, when we're maybe in a partnership and we're in some kind of sacred union. But I feel like there's so much we can journey just as brothers and sisters, and sisters and sisters, and brothers, to kind of, yeah, change these relational paradigms, you know, to release ourselves from these old imprints and these old bonds of what it is to be woman, man, what it is to come together, what it is to just be human to human, and yeah, relate more authentically,
definitely,
and
I think
so
that comes.
yeah.
No, I was just going to say that I feel like it comes back to what I was saying about sex and how we get imprinted with this idea of like desire and this, you know, that women are just there to have sex with, in a sense. And so when we start to dissolve that, we start to realize that intimacy is not just exclusive to an intimate relationship and to sex.
Exactly.
Intimacy is a deep connection to another human being, where you see another human being, and sometimes you don't even need to even touch. It's you know, we did a very powerful one of our retreats did a powerful eye gazing exercise. So it was beyond words. It was just looking into the eyes of another human being, and then the walls drop. The you know, you feel very vulnerable because someone's like looking into you.
Yeah.
But through that, you actually see the other person, and then those patterns of judgment start to drop, because we're so conditioned to judge people on appearance, on cultural preferences, on sexual preferences, on so many different array of ideas, that it really prevents us from actually seeing another human being. So intimacy is something that is so important as a human being, and we can just move from just this kind of like projection onto each other through desire, and actually start to benefit from really seeing.
Exactly. And I think there can be something that happens where, you know, people get into relationship. There's something that happened for me when I maybe around like 30, early 30s, when everyone kind of started getting into relationships and having children. And it was as if this kind of split happened where, I don't know, suddenly it's like, yeah, suddenly all my male friends just kind of like everything shifted and changed. But I feel like, yeah, there's something in that, coming back to that more indigenous tribal way of being, where we can be brother and sister even if you're partnered with somebody. That's really what I'm trying to say. I sat in conversation with a friend, the partner of one of my closest friends, the other day, and shared some questions that I was asking him about, like just asking him questions about what he thought of certain elements of who I am. It was for something I was doing, and it was so wonderful just to sit with him, like you said, without that without any agenda, agenda. Like this is just two people who care about each other and who connect, and it was just the most beautiful thing for both of us. And I didn't describe that very eloquently, but there's something in that that's sparking for me around like kind of forgetting that we're also brothers and sisters. It's not just about, oh, is he a potential partner, is she a potential partner, or is whatever, is there a desire, and almost how we can shut it down if there isn't that like, oh, that kind of sparky, yeah, what happened to that? Where we just embrace those moments of authentic intimacy, even if it's
Yeah,
fleeting, or where that was just nurtured outside of it needing to be anything more than just that, the beauty of
yeah,
that.
exactly. And when
Yeah,
there's no expectation, then the real magic can happen because
exactly.
you're not. Um, I have read this quote recently. It said, "We create imaginary halos of attractiveness over the objects we desire," and that was really powerful for me because it was
Yeah.
like, am I looking at this person for something I want,
Hmm.
or am I genuinely connecting with this person and actually giving? And when you switch
Yeah.
from like wanting to take something to actually wanting to give or wanting to share,
Mm.
you create this sacred connection and this deep intimacy with that other person. And through that, you realize your interconnectivity with the whole, because we are all parts of the whole, and we're not just on this individualistic pursuit of like what I want, my needs,
Hmm.
and then you realize you get your needs met in a very different way, that is not just the way that you think or the way that you desire or expect,
Hmm.
but the way that's very natural and flowing, and it makes you feel whole and complete. And I feel like that comes back to partnership and feeling whole within yourself. Because once you feel whole within yourself, then you seek to want to be completed by another. And then actually paradoxically, when you're whole, then you may meet someone who compliments you, not just fills the void within you, but actually compliments you because you are two whole beings. And I think that is such a profound lesson for each of us, that we are whole within ourselves first,
Hmm.
and we always will be. And then we can, when we relate to others from that wholeness, then we feel each other, we nurture each other, and then more genuine, authentic connection can blossom from that.
Mm, exactly. Yeah, and we're kind of imprinted, well, we're kind of, yeah, there's this big codependency theme, isn't there? I think that we're all kind of having to undo ourselves from.
Yeah,
And I've realized, yeah, that shows up in all relationships,
yeah,
really, if we observe.
yeah,
It's not just about wanting him to be who I need him to be to feel safe and okay. It's all the
yeah,
ways we kind of grasp and want that person to fit what we need to meet something that's unmet within
exactly.
ourselves. And of course that's going to happen from time to time, but
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
that's the work, isn't it?
yeah, completely. And
It's
something I actually
liberationized.
wrote recently, in one of my posts, was that men genuinely feel like they, have to prove something, have to provide something. They have to, have a certain amount of money or a certain, job title to actually prove to a woman that he's worthy. And
Mm,
really, what men desire is actually, no, you've always been worthy just by being yourself. And I think that that's something that men feel like men need to dissolve within themselves, because, yeah, your worth is inherent in who you are as a man, and not what you do and not any external thing. Some men feel like they have to have a flashy car, or they have to show that they're a man, or they're of worth.
hmm.
And that's something that I really want to teach, is that your worth is in your own nature, and you don't need to prove anything.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
So,
exactly.
and I think that, sometimes that is, these unhealthy ideas around what men should be are perpetuated by women sometimes. And so again, that's another healing that we can do for each other, is that I can see you, uh, in your beauty as you are,
Mm.
without any, external influence, and you can see me, and that is true authenticity. honoring of each other.
Exactly. Let's unpack that a little bit though, if we can. Like,
Yeah.
I felt what you said earlier about, I'm really interested in like the father wound, mother wound. And I obviously have my perspective as a woman of how that's played out for me. And I guess kind of through my brother, maybe in relation to how it might have played out for him. Yeah, I'm interested in what you just said as well. And maybe they feed into each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can hold a lens of how a man should be. And there's something that Sharif said in there was a first podcast that was released a couple of weeks ago, how, like, are you a safe space for him? This is something I've been really looking at and exploring and working on over the last couple of years. It's like, probably not. I probably wasn't. And there's reasons for that. But I guess I'm curious about that as women, how we can do better, being honest, how we can do better and how we can create more of a safe kind of space for men to kind of also bring themselves and unravel and do what they need to do. And I'm interested in this mother wound piece, the mother wound in relation to how the masculine then, feels like he has to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah. So with the mother wound, how that kind of manifests is that when a mother hasn't been seen by her own mother and hasn't been allowed to, there may be judgment, there may be a sense of like possessiveness, a sense of like competition there with the daughter. And if that's not addressed, that can perpetuate. And what happens is there is a deep insecurity within them that they feel like they need to grab power because they haven't been empowered within their feminine, because then they have to exert that in more of a masculine kind of way. And so when they get in relationship with a man, they don't feel safe and secure within themselves. So they don't feel like they can really drop into their deep feminine. And so they exert this more masculine energy, which can be possessive and which can be quite diminishing of a man's authentic masculinity. And over time, he can become more weakened and weakened to the point where he forgets himself, he forgets his true power, and becomes, I guess, subservient, and then on top of that, the woman often loses respect. So on top of them feeling emasculated, it's like, I don't respect you because you're not using your masculine energy to create and to go out in the world and be powerful and be a strong man, and so they're almost like punished for that as well, and then they're left feeling angry, they're left feeling resentful, and often isolated, because men don't really have communities where they can express these ideas with other men. A lot of men have maybe, they can go football or go down the pub, but they're not really healthy spaces where they can actually express how they're truly feeling. And so often men feel isolated and emasculated, and they're just left in this kind of space of just kind of anger and maybe shame and resentment. And then that can be projected towards women. And so you can see that this creates this unhealthy dynamic between men and women. And, men, I think women do want to deeply connect with their feminine and dive deeper into their feminine, beautiful feminine qualities. And men want to step into their masculine power, But if you're not allowing each other to do that, if you're not creating those safe spaces you can feel vulnerable to do that, then it just creates this battle between the two, and that results in so many minor conflicts and kind of battles for power, basically. When it should be a complementary energy, because men and women have a complementary energy and qualities, and they can balance each other out if they're allowed to be in their authenticity.
Yeah.
So I've seen this, in my own family, how the mother wound creates men who do feel weak within themselves, and so naturally for me, I got into relationships where I kind of put women on a pedestal, and I didn't really own my own power, and I was just like, I'll do everything for you, and I'll kind of pretty much worship you. And I think that there should be an element of veneration, definitely. But when it becomes a degradation of your own inherent power and quality, then you get weakened, and then this can be perpetuated, and then you start feeling disempowered, lost, and just kind of angry. You're not really being authentically you.
So. And how do women, because that's feeling really familiar for me, and I feel like that's happened like to me in dynamic where I've felt pedestaled, and it's just been a massive no, like I haven't been able to connect with that person. Like there's been a connection, but but no desire for it to become anything deeper, because there's something in that pedestaling that's like, oh, I'm just a human over here. Like I can't hold all of this. Like I haven't got the like it. There is something inauthentic in it, and there's something there's something that feels quite unsafe in that as well. I'm interested to know how those dynamics played out. Like how were those women showing up, and what could have been done differently?
How were they showing up? It just became this, I guess, when I feel like when women are in their more masculine frame, it's like they're not going to physically assert that kind of dominance over you, but it's sometimes verbally, through their intelligence, through their emotional, that can lead into emotional manipulation. And so it can be very subtle, and it can be over time. These subtle little things can lead to bigger feelings of inadequacy, and feeling of just disempowerment, and that can manifest in so many different ways, and I feel like it creates this sense of I feel like women do inherently want men to feel empowered, but because of these patterns of conditioning and learning that we've adopted, we create these unhealthy dynamics. So like you were saying, that felt inauthentic when you were pedestaled. It felt inauthentic because you do want to see a man in his power, and sometimes you want to challenge each other, and you want to. Do you know what I mean? You don't want someone just to be like agree with everything you say, and
you want to know what he needs and what you can bring to him as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I feel like that just manifests in this kind of in this manipulative energy, and like I said, the shadow of the feminine kind of comes out through that, and then it can be very subtle. It can be very overt sometimes as well. But it's just in how you interact with each other, and
Mm.
I'm trying to think of examples.
It was quite a big question, so
Yeah,
don't worry.
yeah.
It's like I don't know where it came from really, but yeah, that's probably one to like could be one to feel into. It
Yeah,
might
definitely.
maybe just people listening, it will spark something for them because I think
Mm.
it's so easy to not realize we're like to sometimes just not realize that these subtleties are playing out, when we relate. And I think as women, we're so imprinted by our mothers, as well. In I've certainly been realizing that, how God, how we imprint what it is to be a woman in relation to a man through the way our mothers have shown up to our fathers.
Right.
And that's like a whole podcast episode on its own. I think it's huge. But that is such a beautiful way in, one of the beautiful ways in, I think, to being like, okay, like, is that true? Is that true for me? Is
Yeah.
that how it needs to be now? And again, our parents are just doing the best with what they have, but we now have a chance to really change those patterns.
Definitely.
Something that's really always alive for me is like the absent father. Is that something that comes up a lot in your circles? Is that something you see in relation to where men can get lost? And I really feel it. I really feel the connection with this kind of rites of passage. And I can see how the mother wound can imprint. But, my experience through my family has been, the father who is wounded, who's unable to lead the son into any kind of level of self-connection or projects his own idea of like be a man, what it is to be a man onto him, and the lostness and the addiction that can come through that kind of story. What's your experience there? And I don't mean just physically absent. Sometimes it's emotional unavailability, or it's maybe the father's in some kind of addiction, or the father is maybe feeling that level of, like you described, with the kind of toxic feminine making him feel, contributing to him not feeling appreciated or worthy or able to step up into his power. It's so complex.
Yeah.
But there might be men listening who never had that role model, never had that connection with their father, that I feel can be so hard to transcend and so hard to move out of, just from what I've seen in spaces and people I know.
Yeah, I think with the absent father, it comes down to just a lack of understanding and lack of empathy towards that man. That man hadn't often. The absent father is a cycle that comes through generation.
Yeah.
My father wasn't there, his father wasn't there, his father wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so what happens is there is a lack of awareness of what it means to have responsibility as a man, and how beautiful and how challenging and how to rise to those challenges and actually be there for your family, and how much you can actually gain from those experiences rather than feeling incapable. And so there is a deep hurt within the absent father, that they haven't been nurtured. And it really comes from childhood. It really comes from that boy that hasn't been loved and hasn't been given adequate nurturing, adequate presence and affection.
Yeah.
And when the boy hasn't experienced that, there is a lot of psychological damage, because he's kind of constantly running away. He's running away from his responsibility. He's running away from himself, essentially. And so he's not responsible for his actions. He kind of has a child, or he has a relationship. And when he's challenged in those situations, he can't deal with it because he hasn't been given the tools to really manage that and understand what it means to be present and accept those responsibilities. So really, we often look at the absent father and we kind of like look at it shamefully, or oh, he's just running away from his responsibility. But we don't look at why and the reasons behind it, and the fact that that man is probably still a boy within himself.
Yeah.
And he just really needs to be nurtured and loved and embraced. And I watched this really powerful documentary called The Work, and I really recommend it to anybody. It was held in a maximum security prison in America. There were volunteers that went in, and they were doing these therapy sessions with these hardened criminals, some of them in there for murder, some of them in there for, very serious crimes. But all of them had this deep trauma around their childhood, that they weren't loved, they weren't appreciated, they weren't seen, they were neglected. And that resulted in them acting violently because they just didn't feel that love. And it was very emotional for me to watch, because it just showed because often as a society, we look at like drug addicts, we look at criminals in disdain. We judge them, but we never look at their story and their history, and it all comes down to the same thing, really, is childhood trauma and a lack of love, essentially. And in those sessions, they were diving deep into that trauma, and they were having these releases, and it was such a powerful, honest, raw experience for them to actually process these deep feelings of shame and guilt, and they were able to move through that and to actually embrace each other. And it was just incredible to witness. And being in that space, that's an extreme of a neglect. But these neglects are within each of us, and they manifest in so many different ways, from the subtle to the extreme. So, but it really comes down to that, and there are complexities within that, but it's very simple at the same time. That we all need presence, love, affection, and just non-judgment, a space where we can actually just express and explore these things within our own being, and then we can actually begin to heal. And a lot of the guys in there were fathers and had absent fathers. So to create men who are strong, loving, and powerful in that they can go out in the world and create change, we need to address that issue, and try to create more of a sense of community and sense of like importance around family, because our family structures are really breaking down in our societies. And the family nucleus is such an important part to raise a child, to create community. And if we don't have these, we don't have importance within this work that we're doing, and take precedence in this work, then what society are we going to create? I feel like a lot of our attention and focus is on the individual, is on materialism, consumption, and not on motherhood, fatherhood, and what it means to create a beautiful, loving family, and friendship and connection.
And community that supports, because it's a lot, isn't it, to hold just that one woman and that one man to hold and raise and lead and guide being or beings. Definitely. Whilst being in their own stuff, their own processes.
especially in a society that doesn't really, women don't get that much maternity leave. Men get next to nothing in that society.
Yeah, zero. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, on top of the family, the external family kind of breaking down, it's like, the pressure of those two individuals is so much.
Yeah.
When really, coming from tribal communities, the whole tribe will be looking after the child. It would be a collective affair.
Yeah.
And there's an African proverb: it takes a village to raise a child. And that's very true. And so it's again, it comes back to really healing the individual and looking at how that individual relates to themselves and their immediate people in their circumference in their community, and then how we can heal ourselves to heal each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, so beautiful. So inspiring. I wonder what advice you would give to any man who might be listening to this, who knows that something needs to shift, who knows something needs to change, but is kind of afraid. I think there's this idea that kind of doing the work and starting to open through the stuff that's painful it can be challenging, but it's hard, isn't it, when you're in it, to sometimes understand this idea that there's going to be deep liberation on the other side. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's curious and who's afraid of just taking that step, and maybe who's stuck in addictive patterns or things that just aren't serving and wants to get out of that?
I'd say first, it's okay to be afraid. That's just a human, that we're just human beings, and it's okay. And really, we're afraid of the unknown. Exactly. But what is more dangerous to an individual is being stuck in what you know and in the safety. And so really, it's just about, like, for me, starting the men's circles, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a clue. I just had this feeling that this work needs to be done, and I wanted to do the work on myself. And so I just began by doing online Zoom meetings with friends, really. And then that just blossomed, because the way will be shown once you step into the fear and into the uncertainty, into the unknown. Then the way will be shown, because that it's just inherent in our nature to be able to forge a way, a path. And often we don't see what's ahead of us because it's the future, and because we're often in our own doubts and fears and insecurities within our mind, and we're perpetually feeding those things. So I would say, step into the fear, step into the unknown and the uncertainty, and you will be met. You will be met by other individuals that feel equally the same, and you'll find solidarity in that. You'll find connection in that, and then from that connection, there is this sense of, like, assured, I guess, security, because we don't know where we're venturing. We don't really know what we're doing, but there is this inner guidance. And once you get out of your own head and out of your own way, in a sense, the path will be shown to you. And trust me, I'm experiencing that right now, doing these men's circles and holding these spaces. So I would say, really take a leap of faith, because why not? Exactly. If you're stuck in a rut, if you feel uncreative, if you feel like a lack of drive and passion, or a lack of purpose, then why not try something new, try something different? Join the men's circle, join a group where that you feel maybe you're uncomfortable in, and really you'll be pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like that's a beautiful wisdom bomb to leave this call on. I feel like I could just talk for so much longer. I'm so glad that you said yes to this. Thank you so much, Samora. And
No, I'm very happy that you invited me on here, and I feel like, you know, your energy is very warm and inviting, and you have a very nurturing quality to your energy. So it made me feel very comfortable. So thank you.
good. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. And all the info about you is going to be below this podcast episode, and I'm going to be posting and promoting it as we go. I really want to come to one of your sound healing events, by the way. It's on my list. I tried to get to the last one, but you sold out before I had time to get the ticket.
We sold out of the next one on the 8th, but because we sold out so quickly, there's another one on the 9th.
Okay, amazing. And yeah, your music, people can follow your music and receive your transmission through your beautiful words and your sounds and your voice. And yeah, just the brotherhood circles as well. I'll post some information about those. But thank you so much. And
thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, you too. Hopefully maybe we'll do a part 2 another time.
Yeah, I'm very welcome. I'm very open to that. So yeah, I love diving deep and exploring these subjects.
Yeah.
So dear to my heart, and obviously dear to yours as well.
Yeah, so
it's
much.
Great to commune and connect, and you know, this is our first time meeting as well. So I think it's very profound and it flowed very effortlessly. So
I think we did well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, take care.